Hello there. We start in the United States, where President Biden's choice for his top trade official has been appearing before the Senate. For the past 4 years, American business has faced a chaotic environment, with deals torn up and trade wars launched on multiple fronts by the Trump administration. So who is this person tasked with rebooting US trade? Well, Katherine Tai is here. She's a respected trade lawyer, the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She speaks fluent Mandarin and has represented the US in disputes against China at the WTO. If she's confirmed by the Senate, it seems she won't be in a rush to scrap the Trump-era tariffs on $360 billion of Chinese goods. Well, James Green is a senior research fellow at Georgetown University, a former trade diplomat at the US Embassy in Beijing. He's worked closely with Katherine Tai in the past and has a magnificent set of curtains behind you. Thanks very much for joining me, James. James,
good morning.
Good morning to you. What do you make of Katherine Tai's appointment? All over the place. It's not just China, but I'm also thinking about some of the building blocks of industry itself, aluminium or aluminum, as you may say, steel as well. It's right across the board. I mean, what are the chances that she will be able to readdress some of these and perhaps change some of the policies around this? Tai is not known to be personally close to Biden, as other cabinet ministers are. How much influence will she really have on shaping economic policies, do you think, particularly given the domestic agenda at the moment? Now let's move on to the markets now, because shares have tumbled around the world after a jump in borrowing costs on the bond market. The yield or return on a 10-year Treasury bond briefly jumped above 1.6%. It's the highest rate in a year. So what is worrying investors? Let's hear from Michelle Fleury in New York. OK, well, joining me now is Mariko Ooi from Singapore. Mariko, can you update us on what's been going on across Asia when it comes to the markets? Let's speak now to Janet Moy, who's the investment director at Brewin Dolphin, which is here in London. Janet, thanks very much for joining me. And now, Mr. Powell was very keen to give reassurance in his congressional testimony, wasn't he, that he's not worried about inflation and that interest rates, low interest rates, are here to stay. But why aren't investors buying it? About this, weren't we, by the investment bank Goldman Sachs? Because at some point, we have to reach a sort of a post-pandemic situation, a degree or a state of normalcy. And that pivotal moment will happen when we start seeing changes in the bond markets. Are we at that moment? Was Goldman Sachs right? Have we seen a return to normalcy in some way? Chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Because something has to lead, and monetary policy goals have got to be followed with action. So, you know, at what point are we going to see a change that sort of follows in the real economy? From the vacation rental platform Airbnb. It's been hit hard by coronavirus, as you would expect, and was forced to lay off hundreds of staff earlier on in the pandemic. But after a slump in bookings, Airbnb says it's seeing signs of a strong rebound in demand in the US as COVID restrictions are eased. Well, let's speak now to Derek Fung, who is the CEO of Cardify, which researches consumer spending behaviour, and he's based in Toronto, Canada. Thanks very much for joining me today. Now, interesting, some of these results coming in, they weren't nearly as bad as many people were predicting. You'd imagine if you were in the accommodation business that you're probably not hoping for a global pandemic when everyone has to stay at home. So how have they managed to weather the storm as well as they? And they sort of point to the resilience of the business in this statement. But this is a company with zero assets and effectively just a pretty good software platform being used or not by the direct consumer. Is it not consumer confidence and spending itself that's showing resilience here and not really Airbnb? So to unusual or perhaps secondary destinations, I saw from the data that more people went to Sicily than went to Florence and Venice combined last year. It was the same here in the UK. More people went to Devon than Oxford and Cambridge combined. So it's interesting what's happening in terms of the shift of consumer spending. Are you seeing that in the data you collect? Okay. Now let's get some of the other day's news, shall we? Mr. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come, banned and now Now, here in the UK, some news for you. Plans to toughen up security in public places following the Manchester Arena terror attack have taken quite a big step forward. The Supreme Court will rule today on whether Shamima Begum, who went to join the Islamic State group in Syria, can now return to the UK. MPs are investigating the safety of smart motorways, which don't always have a hard shoulder. This is BBC World News, the latest headlines for you. Staying with vaccines, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, Novavax, you've probably heard of them all. The pandemic has made US and European drug companies into household names. But the world's biggest maker of vaccines isn't any of those at all. It's actually the Serum Institute of India, set up in the 1960s to give the country affordable access to vaccines. It's now helping companies such as AstraZeneca and the rival Novavax dramatically scale up their production of COVID-19 vaccines by making them under license. SII's boss told the BBC's Aaron Heselhurst he had taken a huge gamble early on that they'd work. Well, viewers on BBC World News can see more of that interview with... Finally, let's turn to the music, shall we? We need to rewind more than 20 years before streaming dominated the industry and a US company called Napster. It caused an earthquake by allowing you to download and share music digitally. I remember doing that. It was illegal under copyright law and was shut down by a lawsuit from the Recording Industry Association of America in 2001. But it's now had a new lease of life after a buyout by a virtual concert company called Melody VR. And today, it's starting to sell shares on the London Stock Exchange. Well, let's speak now to Paul Reynolds, who's a managing director of the global music agency Massive Music here in London. Certain people will remember this, Napster, this brand. And it, of course, was sort of the pioneer for the likes of Spotify that many people will be more familiar with now. Why now? Why is the time to launch? Differentiation there, but surely the first thing music lovers will do once we can all get out of our houses is go to live events, not sit at home watching VR in your pants. I've got all the headlines in just a moment. See you soon.